something. These are the same tactics we would see terrorist recruiters using on vulnerable youth, albeit in smaller, more localized ways before social media, with the ultimate goal of persuading their behavior.
So let's use all our power. How about the power of money? Let's allocate more of our philanthropic dollars, our campaign donations, our investment funds to increase economic and political equity.
You needed to know the swell of the waves. Was the ice coming in? Unfortunately, with global climate change, these generations of knowledge, of patterns of weather knowledge, is made obsolete as global climate change is making weather patterns alter so significantly.
The wind in our faces leaves us no alternative but to live in the moment,
which the viewer has to cross in order to reach the painting itself. Like Verrocchio's curtains, these can be quite ambiguous. They create transitional areas between us as viewers and the painting.
Focused on child poverty and what we can do to alleviate it for a very long time. I would just slightly amend your question because we were making progress in the 90s. We had more people lifted out of poverty. We had a 33% increase in the African-American family income. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't have been looking at more ways to lift more kids out of poverty, but we were on the right trajectory. And unfortunately, we changed direction, and we had policies that I think contributed greatly to the increase in childhood poverty starting in 2001. The Great Recession being the worst of those, but there were also policy decisions, regulatory changes, providing more leeway to the states so that they did not have the either requirement or the incentive to continue lifting people, particularly kids, out of poverty. So
otherwise, it's just going to get dull. And I love that analogy because it makes sense, right? And we do the same thing with our laptops and with our phones. We take the time to charge those every so often, so how come we're not doing the same for ourselves? So if, like me, you can kind of sometimes get stuck in a little cycle of working away at something and you feel like, no, I can't break away from this because I don't have the time, here's something that might help you give yourself permission to take that break. It's something that definitely helps me, and it's the rocking chair exercise. You might have heard of this one before. So what I try to do is I imagine myself being an old lady, kind of enjoying her final years, sitting on a rocking chair, and when I'm looking back at my younger life, what am I going to wish that I did more of, and what am I going to wish that I did less of? Because chances are I'm going to wish that I didn't stress so much, that I didn't put so much pressure on myself or sweat the small stuff, and wish I'd just given myself a break, some time to find balance, to relax, and to enjoy life a little bit more.
So then we also need to think about the large-scale data centers in places like the American Midwest that are being used to analyze your voice, figure out what the command is, try and send you back the relevant piece of information.
So to further spark that will, I wrote and published how-to books, did countless talks, and with others did workshops, and we organized annual rain and tree planting projects in our neighborhood and others. And in our neighborhood alone, since 1996, we have planted over 1,400 native food-bearing trees.
It's genius. Its simplicity spoke to me. There are so many potential applications, and we were just having a brief conversation of the various ways that you could potentially commercialise this technology.
I anticipate we're going to have big conversations over the next 10, 20 years of the implementation of renewable energy, other competing energy sources that might be available, how are these going to be brought together, and it's important that we get all of these well-developed options onto the table so they can be part of the discussion for the Australian community and the New South Wales community as we move into future years.
So years and years and years from now, the apparent size of the moon will actually be smaller than that of the sun, and so total solar eclipses will cease to happen.
Put a little star at the end, because that's just the beginning of our response. And the star indicates that we're going to take the rest of the user's utterance to impress my boss, and we're going to append that onto the end of this string.
It's more a reality than the ones ourselves have created. Imagine what kind of existence we can have if we honor inevitable death of self, appreciate the privilege of life, and marvel at what comes next, and marvel at what comes next. Simple awareness is where it begins. Thank you for listening.
And then I moved to the biotechnology industry. And I got to work on a new approach for breast cancer patients that could do a better job of telling the healthy cells from the unhealthy or cancer cells.
When we use hose water or drip irrigation water to replace the rainwater we wastefully drain away. So we don't do that. Instead, we plant food-bearing, native, and climate-appropriate plants that can thrive just on our harvested rainwater and gray water.
When the present determines the future, but the approximate present does not approximately determine the future.
Of employees, and so we actually had to leave our building for around 11 months. We were in a 3-state area, and it took me a day and a half to get back. We actually had to charter a plane. We couldn't use our own company plane. And we got back to New Jersey, where we were set up on a temporary basis. And I remember just standing up on a table and talking about the fact that this company was going to survive, that they were going to survive. I immediately, that day, went to the victims' families and met with them, which was a really incredible emotional experience.
The third and final aspect of brand perception that's powerful, that I want to make sure you have a really good grasp of, is the benefit of the doubt you receive when you have a strong brand.
The cakes are baked and cooled down. Now we can assemble. So first of all, I'm going to just basically trim off the edges of the cake. I'm going to turn it upside down and take the paper off. Now, because the Battenberg has to be quite square, and all the squares need to be the same, I've got a ruler. So I'm going to measure how thick the cake is, which is about 1 inch.